Hi. Is there a difference, and if so, what is the difference between 360-degree feedback coaching and regular coaching? Following on from my article on 360-degree feedback coaching a couple of weeks ago, I had some questions from a number of people saying, well, what's the difference between 360-degree feedback and ordinary coaching that's not 360-degree feedback? Well, the basic principles of both coaching types are very similar, and the techniques are very similar, as are the objectives of the coaching. That is, overall, to support the coachee to develop through discussing their needs and helping them to define and create their own development plan. It's a very personalized approach in both situations. Now, 360 can be used in two different ways to support this one-to-one coaching relationship. First of all, 360 can be seen as a tool to support a broader coaching relationship. So, as a coach, using a 360-degree input tool, I can get some very useful information to discuss with the coachee. And it really helps them. It opens up the Johari hidden window of things that they didn't know, and therefore can be very, very useful part of coaching discussion. On the other hand, the 360 in itself is a tool for specific development of specific competencies, and therefore supports an overall development program using a coaching methodology. So before I go into that detail, when are the two different types of coaching used? Well, generally, professional and career development coaching tends to focus on long-term goals and career development for an individual. So that individual might be a senior executive, a leader, or a manager. It focuses very much on that individual's career development and their goals for that development. And it should ideally include their personal requirements and where they want to go long term. The emphasis with this type of coaching is on the long-term development of that individual and a relatively long-term development with the coach. That might be over a number of months or even years in some cases. The nature of 360-degree feedback coaching specifically is that it's more particular. It may very well be part of a development program with development outcomes that the organization has required, so has defined and said, these are the development outcomes we want for a number of people in this organization. The outcomes will tend to be across the organization for a particular group, for example, based on a leadership competency framework or core values. And the 360 is used to define the behavior change and to help that individual to reach those levels of behavior change over time. The coaching timetable with 360 feedback, it may just be a one-off debriefing with the coach, or it might be a couple of follow-up sessions, but it's very focused on the feedback itself. Whereas in the first instance, the feedback is a support for a broader discussion. So using 360 to support career coaching, how do you do that? Well, used as a career support tool, then I find a really useful model is John Whitmore's GROW model, which you're probably familiar with. It's GROW, that's GROW. And the GROW stands for, G stands for goal, so what do you want? R stands for the reality, so where are you now? Options is the O, what could you do? And will, the W, what will you do? Now, in a general coaching discussion, the 360-degree feedback tends to fall mainly in the second piece of the model, that is the reality. It's a really useful tool to say, okay, these are your goals. Now, where are you now? In a 360, the individual does a self-assessment, and that gives them a chance to reflect on where they are in their career, particularly the skills and competencies that they have or they aspire to. And then they get the feedback from their colleagues and their line manager, and therefore the coach can help them to say, this is where you think you are, this is where your colleagues think you are. And this is really useful in terms of getting a realistic picture of where they are. It can also be very useful in helping them to work out whether they are ready for the next level in their career based on those competencies. The 360 feedback can also provide very interesting and useful input into the options, the O part of the GROW model. In other words, what could you do? Now, as you know, the feedback in a 360 is usually based on ratings, rated statements, and also written feedback. Now, the rated statements help the individual to see, based on those competencies, where they are highly rated and where they are not so highly rated. And therefore, they can actually use those statements and the ratings to say, okay, this is an area that I could usefully develop. Similarly, the comments and the written feedback is very useful for giving them options, as in the O part of the GROW model. So the job of the coach then is to help them to use the 360 feedback for that part of the GROW discussion, the GROW coaching discussion. Now, alternatively, if you're using 360-degree feedback as the development tool itself, then it helps to debrief in a particular way, which I will come to in a second. And this is where an individual has received feedback that's across the organization, that's specific to the organization's competencies, and that the person doing the coaching is going to help them to understand where they fall within that. So how do you debrief the 360 report? Well, first of all, the coach needs to understand the 360 framework and how that has been developed for the organization. Because this is based on usually the organization's objectives, it's important for the coach to understand that context. The coach should be briefed on the questionnaire itself, what it's seeking to measure, and its relevance and importance for the individual and the organization, particularly if it's a bespoke 360. When debriefing the 360 report, the coachee should ideally be able to see their report a little short time before the coaching discussion. Not too long though. Usually 24 hours is a good amount of time. This gives them a chance to read the report so that they're prepared. But they won't have time to think about it too much or brood on it if there's any unexpected feedback in there. Now, from a coach's point of view, as for all feedback, it's really important for the coach to get a feel for how the coachee has read the feedback. What is their mood when they join you for the debriefing session? It's a good idea to start with some open questions. You know, how do you feel about the feedback you've read? Do you think it's accurate? Does it match up to what you expected? Do you think it's useful? Is there anything that is new or unexpected? And this gives you a chance to get the temperature of the coachee going into the debriefing session. And your coaching skills, you know, as a coach are still used and very important when looking at the 360 feedback with the coachee, just as in a normal coaching conversation. So you will be asking open questions, active listening, providing options, you know, and taking the coachee through the information in the report and giving them an opportunity to talk about the report as well. One of the key ways to help the individual take the feedback on board is to allow them to discuss it as much as you talk. And as a coach, you will understand that. But even if you are a line manager debriefing, it's important to understand that. So again, ask the question of the coachee where there are consistently highly rated skills, where there are consistently skills that are not so highly rated. What do you think this means? Can you get more information from the report? Why do you think these ratings are coming up? Can you think of an example of where this happened? And really use the opportunity to really get the person to open up based on the feedback that they've received. And also the results, it's important that they are relevant to the individual. So which strength and development areas do you think are most relevant for your attention? Maybe currently based on your career goals. So it's great to link up the feedback with what they want to. And moving on from the report itself, the skills for supporting the individual to create a development plan are important. So as you would do with the GROW model, where do you want to go with this? From the feedback, what do you want to develop? How can you create a development plan? And obviously make that time limited as well. So by when do you want to achieve these development goals? So there are similarities in both ways of coaching. Coaching skills are required in both. Really the only difference between regular coaching, including 360 or 360 coaching, is really the focus of the discussion, whether it's the individual or whether it's the organization's requirements within a 360 framework. So I hope that's been helpful. If you've got any questions, please feel free to message me on LinkedIn, and I hope you have a great rest of the day.